Hello, board members. After long calculations and many hours spent, we determined collectively the right decisions to make and the correct financing alternatives for Flash Memory Incorporated. My colleagues and I, Justin, Jose, Naz, and Bar, have all worked very hard, and we will be presenting this to you.
Okay, so based on our calculations and everything, we have options of using retained earnings to fund the project, obtain additional financing through factoring and private sale of common stock. But before we, sought out any of those options, we had forecasted the project just based on how they're currently running. And these are a few of our assumptions that many of you guys already have. So for example, cost of goods sold, we use 81% of the sales. So these are all calculations that we take into account when we're forecasting. And this is, like I said, without the project line to see how things are going to go with the current condition. So if we move along, these are just a reflection of all those assumptions, and any number other than those assumptions are just some base numbers. And just take a note that everything is in thousands other than the number of shares outstanding. So this is kind of like, just how it is forecasted without the product line. So you can see more a little bit to get into next. So this is for the balance sheet, kind of the same thing. These are the assumptions for it. Many have. Now, one assumption that we had calculated ourselves is the notes payable, and how the notes payable came out to be 70% of the accounts receivable, and we used that accounts receivable based on 30 divided by 365 times sales. So that's how we used to come with that number. That's a number that kind of factors in to what we continue to do. If you keep moving along on the next slide.
How in the past has reached 70%.
Oh yes, in the past it has reached 70%. So now we're kind of like at our max. So it's just going to show how it's progressively got there. So.
Yeah, in years 2007 through 2009, if you calculate the percentage that notes payable is of accounts receivable, you see that it's coming up towards 70%. So for example, in 2009, notes payable was about 69% of accounts receivable. So we went ahead and made the assumption that in the next forecasted years, it will be 70% since they were reaching that already.
And this is just a reflection of the assumptions as well as those numbers that we had. And same thing is in thousands and shares. If you want to just move on to that next slide because it's kind of like this one. So this is what she was talking about and how the notes payable, it increases from 2010 to 2011 and then it kind of caps out because it has similar sales. And then this is the percentage of growth of the notes payable going from 36 to 20, so it's like a visual of what she explained. And then now from 2012 it's at 0, so that's when we come to the the process of okay, how we're gonna get future monies. So then we go into our financing options. Some of our product line changes.
And introducing this new product line, in 2011, 21.6 million was generated in sales. Then increases to 28 million, and plateaued in 2013 at 28 million. This represents the short-term product cycle. Then it decreases to 11 million in 2014 and continues to decrease in 2015 to 5 million. I'll be discussing the new plant equipment and the one expense along with the cost of goods sold later. The network capital becomes 26.15% of sales, and there was a $400,000 sunk cost for research and development in the past 9 months. This was reported in a 2010 balance sheet.
Going back to the generation of sales, Flash, because they're in technology, they have very short life cycles for their products. So that's why we see just over 5 years how the sales of the product dramatically decline, which means that they're going to have to start creating new products. So you can see the product's life cycle just based on the amount of sales produced.
Another reason why it declined is because of the innovation of new technology and competition. So you have to keep up with that, keep up to date. And here we have our future cash flow statement. This is where we calculated our weighted average cost of capital. And we used our we calculated our WACC through our cost of debt and our cost of equity for each period. We calculated each of the cash flows. We then, as you can see, our average WACC is 6.04%. That was our discount rate for our NPV. Using that discount rate, we discounted each one of the cash flows from 2011 to 2015, and that gives us our NPV, which is positive. So we are accepting the project. Our NPV is $4,581,560. So that's it. We will be accepting the project. And taking on the investment, some costs. $2.2 million for property, plant, and equipment. This is required in order to generate sales from 2011 to 2015. This was recorded in 2010 because that was before 2011, our projected sales and income. And our $300,000 in advertising costs just to launch the new product line. This is a one-time expense. And our cost of goods sold decreased to 79% of sales. And you'd think that our overall sales would decrease, but naturally it didn't. Overall increases all sales just because the proportion of sales to the cost of goods sold decreased from 81% to 79%. And based off of the previous slides where you see the decline, obviously you'd see that the sales dropped. So there needs to be alternative financing, even though we are going to take this investment.
Alright, so our first option to get external financing for this new product line investment would be our factoring group option. And basically right now through the commercial bank, we are getting 70% of our accounts receivables, but that's not enough money, so we need to take on a higher risk loan, which would increase to 90% of our accounts receivable, but that means our interest rate would also go up to 9.25% from 7.25%. And the reason our interest rate is gonna go up is because it's a high risk loan, so they need to spend additional money to monitor our accounts receivables because they need to make sure from our original year that we take out the 90% loan that our accounts receivable isn't dropping, because that means we have more than 90% of our accounts receivable loaned out in following years. So this is our income statement, including our new 90% loan. So you can see that our interest expense starting 2010 shoots up a lot more, because up until 2009 we were only paying 7.25%, and from then on we're paying 9.25% of our notes payable. And then the $300,000 of our one-time fee for advertising is included in 2011's selling general administrative expenses. Okay, and then you can see that our notes payable is also increasing starting 2010 and on, because it's going up to 90% of our accounts receivable. And also, I want you guys to keep in mind that our net sales includes our original forecasting without the new investment, and also includes the expected generated sales with the new investment that we're adding in. Okay, and then our total current liabilities is also increasing, obviously, because we're taking out a bigger loan. Okay, and then for our cash flows, we calculated a new weighted average cost of capital using a new cost of debt, which includes a 9.25% rather than 7.25%. We calculated it again for each year and got the average, which we use to calculate NPV, and the WACC is what we use to discount the future cash flows for that number. And we can see that it's a positive number, so this would be a good option as a financing option for this product line investment.
Okay, so our second alternative to financing is going to be the private sale of common stock. And as you can see, currently the number of shares outstanding is close to 1.5 million, and we plan to sell 300,000 shares of stock to or privately. So that would increase it to close to 1.8 million. You see the exact numbers right there. And technically, we'd be selling them at $25 per share, but the company would only receive $23 per share due to $2 for baker's fees. And the company wasn't making money from, or barely making money from shares originally, just because they were ownership, because the partners that began Flash are the only ones that hold the stock. And then in a second, I'll show you. Okay, so this is the income statement for the common stock. Again, this includes both the forecasted sales and the projected sales for the new product line. And there aren't many changes right here for common stock, except I believe, or you can see where the little green dot is over in the F column. That again just projects the changes that the product line creates. And if you go over to the balance sheet, so here in the balance sheet you can see again the number of shares outstanding increases in 2011 and on, and then we also increase the paid-in capital in excess of par value. So that actually increases by 6.9 million, because if you do $23 times the 300,000 shares of stock that we'll be selling, that's equal to 6.9 million. So that's just added into the paid-in capital in excess, and that in turn will increase total shareholders' equity. And of course, debt remains the same. And if we can go back to the income statement, please. Yeah, so the income statement, you can also see the earnings per share over here. That is going to be divided by the close to 1.8 million instead of the around 1.5. Therefore, the earnings per share technically decrease. And then here we have the cash flows and the NPV. So again, we calculated the WACC based on the cost of debt and the cost of equity. So this time, in comparison to the factoring group, they used the interest expense of 9.25. Here we go back to the 7.25 when we calculate the cost of debt. That's why the cost of debt right here is lower than it was in the factoring group. And again, we calculated the WACC for each year based on its cash flows, and we took the average WACC of those, which comes out to 6.04 again. And we took that and the cash flows, and we calculated the NPV, which comes out to 70,998,630. Again, this is all in thousands, so you need to add those extra, or move the decimal over 3 points. And okay, so here we have the differences in the financing alternatives, just to kind of clarify what the difference is between the two, specifically between the numbers.
So for the factoring group, our interest expense is increasing to 9.25%, and our earnings per share and our our notes payable is increasing at 90% from 2011 to 2015, so our total current liabilities will also increase. But our paid-in capital, in addition to par value, will stay the same, as well as our total shareholders' equity, because we're not issuing any more equity, but we are taking on more debt.
Okay, and in comparison, the private sale of common stock, with the interest expense, it does stay at 7.25% because we don't need to add that, the interest rate for extra risk because we won't be taking that on. And that just means that net income will remain the same, but earnings per share again does drop because we do add more shares. And the notes payable does stay at 70%. It can eventually decrease because you do have a different financing alternative, so you don't need to solely rely on that 70%. And total current liabilities will stay the same as long as notes payable stays the same. But paid-in capital, in addition to par value, of course, again, will increase by the 6.9 million that the sold shares bring in. And the math is done for you right there, and so it comes out to $14,880,000. So in exchange, total shareholders' equity increases.
As Benji was saying, this project is positive, and we have a couple investment opportunities that we want to discuss with you guys. The first is retained earnings. Just a couple cost benefits with this. Retained earnings, we're basically going to be using the net income from our income statements, what we're getting from our original products. We're going to be reinvesting that, and the good thing about this is that it's a debt-free financing. We're not going to have any outstanding notes payable, so there's going to be no loans, and it's going to be less risky. The cost of this is that, unfortunately, it's not going to be enough to fund the project. We need a lot more capital, and we've decided to not go with this option because it won't continue the growth of our company. And our next option is the factoring group that Laura was just discussing. The cost of this is pretty heavy. It's a huge increase in notes payable, as they were mentioning. You guys, as the board of directors, wanted an 18% debt to equity ratio, and if we use this factoring group, it's going to push us a little bit above that, which means that it is going to be a riskier option for funding the project. It is going to increase our net receivables to 90% as opposed to that 70%, and the interest rate will go up 9.25%. The good thing about the factoring group is it will give us proper funding. It'll extend the growth of that project all the way till the next couple of years until the technology lab hits. And that's one of the options we were really looking at as far as proper funding for the project. It does have a lot of risk to it, but it was a good option. And then our third is the private sale of common stock. As mentioned before, we can sell the stock for $25, net $23. We're looking at about a $6.9 million increase in revenue to help fund that project. One cost is that it is giving up some form of ownership to our company, and we're selling a huge amount of our shares, about 30%, to a private institution. The benefit of this is that it is the highest income and growth rate for our company and this future project that we want to take on. It has a low debt to equity ratio, which as the board of directors, that's one thing you guys obligated. There is no increase in debt. There's no increase in debt, and this option will allow the project to go further. And we decided to go with this option because it does have the highest NPV. It has about $3 million more than the factoring group, and the benefits far outweigh the costs. As mentioned, you guys as board of directors wanted at least a 70% receivables, and this is going to hit that mark, and also that debt to equity ratio is going to stay below 18%. So we at Flash Group decided to go with sale of private common stock to fund our new project.
to me why we did a different WAC for each financing alternative?
The changes were because of the cash flows. They were all different, that kind of goes along with the NPV, but the WAC, the cost of debt did change in between, for example, the factoring group and solely the investment and the common stock, just because the interest expense did rise, so that also changes of the WAC.
Could you go back to one of those slides, just so we can see it?
Here, I'll show you. So, for example, right here, you see the cost of debt is 5.652%, and when you do the one for the common stock, it's at about 4.452. So that does change the WAC up a little bit.
And how did you get the cost of equity?
The cost of equity, we used CAPM, and the case did provide a market risk premium and a risk-free rate, and we took the average beta of the 3 competitors, and we used that to calculate the cost of equity.
So if you have an average WAC, why couldn't you just discount it and show the cash flows by the WAC from that year?
We did do that. That's where the present value of cash flows comes in, but when we did the net present value, we used just the earnings after tax and the average WAC so that we don't discount them twice.
We want to double discount them, because then it would change the numbers totally out.
Why did you guys place $400,000 sunk costs in the year 2010 when it had already been incurred in 9 months?
It should have been in 2009. That was just a verbal mistake. But because it is a sunk cost, it's not really going to matter, and it doesn't appear in any of our statements as it is.
So I know you guys had a 79% cost of goods sold. Are we assuming that for all of our previous product lines, that that's also going to apply? Or would it be 81% of all the previous ones and 79% of the new product line?
We assume that it goes across the board because it takes into consideration the property, plant, and equipment, which is, or it takes into consideration the depreciation of the new. So we just assume that all across the board because it would have been a little crazy to put all those together.
So you decide to finance the company by issuing all stock. So how much is the price that is each year?
Well, we're only issuing it one time. It's going to be 300,000 shares at $25 per share, and then there's that $2 banker's fee. So that's going to be the only.
Are you gonna do the purchase later or?
That hasn't come up yet. We're just looking to finance the new product line for now.
Did you only calculate the debt equity ratio for the common stock, or did you do it for the other financing alternatives as well?
Well, even just as like basic stuff, due to the increase in debt in the factoring group and then the increase in total and current liabilities, you can kind of tell where the ratios go because in the factoring group you have the increase of the debt, in the common stock you have the increase of the equity. So you can kind of tell because the board of directors asked 2 things of us. It was to try to get the debt to equity ratio to 18% and to get receivables no more than 70%, even further that. So the factoring group, because we take on additional notes payable, the debt to equity ratio will increase because we have additional debt. And then in the common stock, because you have an increase in shareholders' equity, then the debt to equity ratio will decrease.
Can you show us what's that?
I'm not sure what these are on. have that available.